Hello, everyone. Today we'll continue talking about Stoicism, and we'll be talking about fatalism and then a kind of implementation of fatalism and grief. Fatalism is central to Stoicism. It's one of the more kind of controversial pieces of the puzzle, but for it to be Stoicism, it has to have the element of fatalism. A contemporary person reading into the Stoics might want to distance themselves from things like the fatalism, and to the extent that they do so, they not fully endorse Stoicism. Where fatalism is such an essential element in the way they conceive of the world that it seems that is part of what it is to be a Stoic. So some Stoic practices can be divorceable from Stoicism, but it wouldn't like be fully Stoicism at the end. And fatalism seems to be so close to the heart of what it is to be a Stoic. So it is worth a while to understand the actual fatalism view and the way in which it influences the rest of the Stoic conception of the good life. So let us begin. So first, some notes on fatalism. Two slightly different kinds of fatalism, and I want to spell them out in a little more detail. The first observation is the one I've made already. Stoics embrace fatalism. They think, one, that it is true, but also that it is foolish not to think that it is true, right? It is wise to be a fatalist, they think. And they have two different conceptions of fatalism. The first one I'm going to call fatalism one, and it's something like the following: an event is fated, in this sense, fated one, if it will happen regardless of what any human person does. So some event is going to be fated because it's going to happen regardless of what anyone does. And an example that is unpleasant is the following: we will all die, right? To be human is to be mortal, is to be a kind of organisms, and organisms by their very nature cease to be. So we will die, and we're fated one to die. Regardless of what we do, we will die. So if we're walking in the street and we don't look to the side, we just walk, a bus might run over us, and then we will die. So we can do something to prevent that, right? We can, before we cross the street, look both ways and make sure that there's no bus coming, and then we will prevent or at least not get killed that time. But the point of fatalism one is that regardless of what we do, at some point we will die, right? So fatalism one is of that sort. We might be able to prolong our existence for a bit longer, but given the kinds of beings that we are, we can't do it forever. We will die at some point. We're fated to die. The Stoics had that conception, but it was a bit stronger. So, like here, the picture is the picture of three fates, three goddesses, who actually settled the dictated what would happen, right? They kind of structured the nature of reality, and they dictated things that would happen. Here are a couple of the examples. One is the story of Oedipus, and this is from a Greek story as well, so it's close to the Stoic worldview. And there was a prophecy that Oedipus was going to kill his father and marry his mother. And the prophecy was made when Oedipus was a baby, and then the parents knew of the prophecy, and they were not very thrilled for the prophecy. So they decided to discard Oedipus. They put him in the forest, in the wilderness, thinking, hey, he's going to die as a baby in the wilderness. So as an attempt to stop or prevent the fulfillment of the prophecy, the parents put Oedipus away, right? That they tried to avoid their destiny, their fate by doing that. But instead of Oedipus dying, some strangers found him, and they thought, oh, there's a baby, so they adopted the baby and they raised the baby. And later in his life, Oedipus himself learned of the prophecy that he was, destined to, he was fated to kill his father and marry his mother. And he didn't like that. No one likes the fate, right? So he ran away from the adoptive parents that he did not know were adoptive. So he thought, when he heard the prophecy, that it was them, one of whom he was going to kill and the other one who's going to marry. So in order to escape his fate, his destiny, he moved away, right? He made some distance between whom he thought were his parents. And in so doing, he ran across this older person. They get into a petty fight, and Oedipus ended up killing that person. And then he went into this kingdom, and he ended up, seducing the queen and getting married to the queen. And then it turns out that the person he ran into on the way there was his father, unbeknownst to him. And then it turns out this queen that he seduced and he married, was his mom, and unbeknownst to him. And of course, it's a tragedy, right? And he, pokes his eyes out, as sounds of desperation. But anyways, it's a tragedy. And for our purposes, it's worth pointing out that both the parents discarding Oedipus for the sake of trying to prevent the prophecy is an essential part of the story why the prophecy came into being. Oedipus's own attempts to undermine or prevent the prophecy by leaving who he thought were their parents was also an essential part of the causal story that led to the Oedipus fulfilling his prophecy, the prophecy. So the point of Fate 1 is that the gods, the Fates, kind of saw all of these things going on, and they said, Oedipus, you're going to kill your father, marry your mom. Like, regardless of what you do, your very attempt to not do this will ultimately end up bringing it about. So once the Fates have spoken, once the gods have spoken, it will happen. And this Fate 1 involves things like that, like big things, like when you're going to die, things like that. Or the Stoics believe what kind of role you're going to play in life. You're going to be an emperor, you're going to be a slave, you're going to be male, you're going to be female. But like some of the main characteristics that settle the kind of person you are and the kind of expectations, like obligations you have, those are dictated by the gods. And then you just embrace it. You accept that, yep, I'm an emperor. The gods made, yeah, I'm a slave. You accept whatever major role is given to you by the gods. And now your response is just to play your role well. It's a very minor kind of space of freedom within the role of fatalism. So don't be anxious, don't despair, don't be frustrated about the dictates of fate, right? Because they're beyond your control. So like accept fatalism and don't worry about those things. That's one of the main elements of fatalism. There's a second one that Stoics also embrace, and this is more Fate 1, you might think, yeah, but there are no such gods and I don't have to worry about it. It might feel like you can create a lot of distance. Fatalism 2 is harder though, because this is much more scientific. So an event is fated to happen because it happens as a necessary consequence of the causes that lead up to it. And Stoics thought that the world was this nexus of cause and effect, right? Effect precedes cause, which itself is an effect that precedes another cause, and so on. There's this unbroken chain of causes and effects that spans the entire universe. And we are embedded in that web of causes. And because we're embedded in the web of causes, while we do what happens to us and the responses to it, at least in the physical external world, are kind of the necessary consequences of the physical previous state of the world, the causes that led up to it. Now this one gets much closer to the heart, right? Now this is more sciencey. This is not like appealing to the gods. And the Stoics thought, yeah, that's how the world is. Cause precedes effects, and effects follow because the causes were there, the physical causes that determines everything. So it seems to rule out any control beings might have over external things, any physical event, right? That's pretty much everything. So Stoics also bought this. They thought, yeah, fatalism too. Like most things are outside of your control because you cannot control the physical state of the universe and the causes, so you cannot control the external events that happen to you. They're just part of this causal network. So don't worry about it, right? Because it's beyond your control. It's foolish for you to worry about you cannot control, so just kind of let it, enjoy the ride, as it were, right? Like you're embedded in this causal network, just enjoy the ride, don't worry about it. It's foolish, retain your tranquility. And again, this is more like sciencey, Newtonian mechanics, causal determinism. So it's a kind of thing that contemporary thinkers do take seriously still when this goes all the way back to the Stoics. So anyway, those are the conceptions of the nature of fatalism that Stoics embrace, but they also thought not merely that it was true, but that it was wise to be a fatalist. So let's look about why it is wise to be a fatalist. Here are the benefits, the kind of like why it is foolish not to be a fatalist. A major benefit is that you keep your tranquility regarding everything that is external to you. Why? Because everything that is external to you is fated, either fate 1 or fate 2, but it's fated, it's beyond your control. And it is foolish to concern yourself, to worry about, to be anxious about things beyond your control. And if the whole physical world is the series of causes and effect that is necessary, then all of it is beyond your control. So hey, like most of reality is beyond your control. And like the silver lining for the Stoic is that now you don't have to worry about it. And now it is foolish to worry about it. So just kind of like enjoy your tranquility a bit, and with the recognition that everything that happens, everything that is external, is beyond your control. There's more. There are more kind of like sources of consolation or wisdom in being a Stoic. Here's one of the things the Seneca, for example, says. it is a great consolation that it is together with the universe that we are swept along. So it's not just that um, things are beyond your control and it is foolish to concern yourself with those things because they're beyond your control, but also that there's this kind of like peace and tranquility, consolation that comes with knowing that you're part of the whole, that your, at least your external actions, your actions in the physical world, are kind of part of the river of cause and effect. Everything's interconnected in this particular way, and there's this consolation in knowing that this universe is being swept along by the physical laws, and you're just going out for the ride. So like relax, enjoy the ride, right? Like have the consolation of it is with this unity of the universe that your actions are being driven. You're part of this unstoppable river of cause and effect, and just go along with the ride. Here's a similar but a slightly different observation. There's a kind of spiritual consolation that is related. The Seneca observation is just about cause and effect, just about connection with the physical world. This spiritual consolation is more about connection to the gods. And again, this brings in the theological stuff. The fates here, when they're weaving the universe, with they're weaving the causes and effects, and they're settling what's going to happen. They're wise. They do things for the best. So there is spiritual consolation in knowing not merely that you're being swept along, but that you're being swept along with the universe for the sake of something good, right? It's for the best, ultimately, that things are arranged in the way that they are. Why? Because it is the gods who are doing the arrangement, and they know, right? They're wise. So there's this spiritual uplifting, consolation, satisfaction that gods are in control, and then you don't have to worry about it. Furthermore, to do otherwise, that is not to accept fatalism, is to rebel against nature itself, is to shout the nature of reality and say, "How dare you!" Right? And there's something foolish there. Why? Because it's nature. You're gonna lose, right? But also because nature, the Stoics thought, there's something wisdom and goodness to nature. Nature is not mere natural selection, as some people tend to think nowadays, but nature is wise. Nature acts for the good. Why? Well, in part because it is, arranged by the gods, but also there's something about the nature of reality that nature seeks its own good, and that why it's wise and good to follow nature, because nature points to that which is good. So to rebel against nature is foolish, because rebelling against something that is good and wise. And finally, it's futile. It is pointless for you to rebel against nature. Why? Because it's nature, right? It's going to win. If you're being dragged down this river, inevitably this river of cause and effect. To shout, to raise your fist and shout at the river is pointless. You're still going to be dragged, right? So you're wasting your valuable time shouting at the river. It is not. It's not going to help. So this conception of fatalism has implications for things like grief. So the Stoics make a distinction. Well, Irwin, talking about the Stoics, makes a distinction between emotional reflexes and full-fledged emotions. And one of the things that Epictetus says is that you, in principle, have control over your emotions, but that means something like the following. There are emotional reflexes that are given to you by nature. There's the immediate kind of like jerky, instinctive emotional response. In that, Irwin points to, Stoics are not committed to saying that you have control over that, at least not really. But that's not a full-fledged emotion, right? So the former, the emotional reflexes, are physical facts beyond our control. They're just kind of like jerky responses. So perhaps even in principle, we cannot control this. The full emotions like grief, anger, resentment, love, like those full emotions, those do involve an element of interpretation, right? Someone insults you and there's the jerky response of like anger, but then for it to be like fully anger is for reason to intervene, or at least interpretation and belief to intervene, and now for you to think that, oh, it is bad for people to talk to me that way. And it is your belief that now kind of allows the mere emotional reflex to convert into full-fledged anger. So a way that the Stoics, a wise way of dealing with the world, is by thinking about the having the healthy detachment with things outside. So we have this jerky emotional response, to an insult, for example. You can immediately pacify your kind of anger and frustration by remembering that everything that you have is, unload from the face, right? That you're part of this river that is floating, and the person was kind of like destined to you, was fated to say the bad things. And why would you be upset at something that is beyond your control because it's fated? And then it allows you to not transition from the mere emotional reflex to a full-fledged emotion of anger that ends up undermining your happiness, right? It enables you to have the jerky response, but then like immediately dissipate that and kind of like be in control and keeping your cool and doing well. So it is really that at that level that the fatalism part, that the reminding yourself that it is foolish to concern yourself with things outside of control. It is at that level that gives you the emotional control. Here's the final observation I want to talk about before I let you go. So Epictetus talks about, warns us about catching the griefs of others, right? So grief is one of those negative emotions, and from the Stoic perspective, it undermines tranquility. So it's not your friend, it's not good for you. Being angry is not your friend, it's not good for you, right? Being envious, being resentful, like it's just not good for you. Why? Because it undermines your tranquility, and for other reasons, but that's one of the main ones. So what happens with a friend of you is grieving, right? A friend's mom died. And do you grieve with them? Do you sympathize? And by sympathize, I mean you share the emotion of pain. Do you grieve too? Is that the mark of a good friend? Does true friendship require that you share the negative emotion with someone who's experiencing? If someone is sad, do you become sad with them? If they're grieving, do you grieve with them? Is that the true demands of friendship? Is that a way of like showing you true friendship? Epictetus says no. Says friends don't want their friends to catch their own griefs. If you have a friend who's grieving or who's very sad and they want to feel the solidarity of sharing the emotion, they're being selfish. They are, instead of caring for what is good for you, the friend, they want to dwell in their own pain, right? There's this like irrational desire for them to dwell in their own pain, and they want to like spread the pain around. So they're not really being that good of a friend. And think of it from your perspective. Uh, if you want your friend to grieve with you, you are being kind of vain. You're overblowing your value, your importance in relationship to the friend. Why? Because to be a true friend is to want what is good for the friend, right? That's an essential element of being a friend. If someone is claims to be your friend, but is always taking your money, is always, like abusing you and is making jokes at your expense and things like that, they're not your friend, right? You can tell someone's your friend primarily by noting that they are interested in things that are good for you, right? That's the basic way of telling good friends from not good friends. And Epictetus says that applies to grief too. The friend who's grieving and who wants you to cry with them, it's not a true friend because their main concern is to dwell in their own pain instead of caring about what is good for you too. The true friend who is grieving does not want their friends to grieve. He likens this. He connects it to taking a poison, right? So if you are a good friend and you foolishly take poison, you have a mistake, or whatever, you're hurting and you're upset, then a friend comes to visit and try to console you. It would be foolish for you to say. It would be a best sign that you're a very bad friend to say, "Oh, this hurts so much. Drink some of it so we can both, commiserate together. Drink some of the poison." Uh, that means you're not a good friend, right? Like for you to be a good friend is to perhaps want the person to be there to console you, but not for them to have the pain as well. And the Stoic view is that grief, anger, emotions, and all of those negative emotions are bad all the time. A good friend doesn't want those upon someone else. They don't want them upon themselves, right? So a good friend should want them on the other too. So the demands of true friendship involve not wanting your friend to share your grief. And on the other side, by the same token, when someone is grieving, you shouldn't feel the demand of sharing their grief. So you shouldn't, as a good friend, catch their grief. And that's wise, says the Stoic. Okay, well, let's end here. I will see you next time.